Okay, wonderful. Great. Distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, very, very good morning to each and every one of you. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you to this virtual conference for Building Warehousing Competitiveness 2021, with a special focus on sustainable infrastructure, partnerships, and altering operating models. I consider it a privilege to welcome Dr. Surendra Ahirwar, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India. Dr. Ahirwar has a wide experience of managing both rail and road linked logistics and transforming them for the steel industry, both major steel plants and minor steel plants across the country. He's also played a huge role in transforming both passenger marketing and passenger terminal experiences for the Indian Railways in different roles. He currently plays a pivotal role in the Department of Logistics in the Ministry of Commerce for implementation of the National Logistics Platform, along with a whole host of very, very critical supply chain and logistics initiatives that the Government of India is taking, such as the e-logistics marketplace and an integrated development plan for the logistics sector. He's also, his area of expertise is PPP partnerships, and we are again honored to have you here, Dr. I would also like to welcome Mr. Anshuman Singh, who is a member, of course, of the CII National Committee on Logistics, and he's also the chairman and managing director of Stella Value Chain Solutions. I've heard Dr. Anshuman Singh speak, frankly, in person, and I must share that he is a visionary, a true founder, entrepreneur in India who has transformed modern logistics in this country, both on a unit level, pan-India, across different spaces. He is, I would say, responsible for many firsts, for bringing in modern warehousing, for bringing in best-in-power technology, sustainable infrastructure at DCs at par with the best in the world. He's also been responsible for setting up build-to-suite buildings and the use of best-in-class WMS and implementing high-end automation such as put-to-light technology and integrating an end-to-end supply chain. I would also like to take this opportunity of welcoming my good friend, Manish Sehgal, who is, frankly, I think needs no introduction. He's a managing director at Alvarez & Marshall. He is frankly a sector expert for logistics, and that's a very vast subject. And I would say he's a sector specialist across the entire domain. Manish has 17 plus years of experience in consulting practices, advisory practices, M&A practices. He's a specialist for market entry strategies, PE strategies, and a whole host of super special segments within the logistics industry. I think it's just invaluable to have Manish as a part of this panel. I would also like to welcome Mr. A.M. Vishwanathan, who is also a member of the CII National Committee on Logistics and Executive Vice President, Special Projects, Godrej Storage Solutions. Godrej Storage Solutions is a strategic business unit of Godrej and Boyce Manufacturing Company Limited, a part of the Godrej Group, one of India's most pioneering engineering and consumer products enterprises. Godrej Storage Solutions is a pioneer and a market leader for over 6 decades in the field of racking and shelving and storage solutions, as well as material handling equipment. Mr. A.M. Vishwanathan is with the Godrej Group for the last 4 decades. He is an alumna of XLRI and the College of Engineering in Guwahati. Sir, warm welcome. I would also like to take a few quick minutes to brief our audience about our CII Institute of Logistics. The CII Center of Excellence across India are supporting the Indian industry through various services on key areas for India's sustainable growth. To address the need of sharpening India Inc.'s competitiveness edge through better logistics and supply chain practices, the CII's Institute of Logistics, or what we call the CIL, was established as a center of excellence in logistics and supply chain. The institute is currently engaged in the below international activities. We are doing a senior management training program for the United Nations. We're doing a certified warehouse Kaizen practitioner program in association with the Japan Institute of Logistics Systems, Japan. We also have 2 certified programs in collaboration with the Singapore Logistics Association, the Logistics Academy Singapore. We also, and those 2 programs are the digital supply chain transformation and the digital and warehousing and automation. The institute also recently completed an extensive survey on skills, competencies and training situations in India under the guidance of the World Bank. Some of our upcoming digital events are the Global Supply Chain Summit, the Automotive Supply Chain, and the Scale Awards. This is the 8th edition. Very quickly about the conference that we are kickstarting and conducting today. We are basically standing and we are committed to serve the warehousing industry, and which has consistently demonstrated its resilience even during this pandemic period. The warehousing sector has now clearly shown that its time has come. It's ended up becoming a very resilient and a darling of the investor community around the world. This conference attempts to derive insights into growing outsourcing markets with deliberations amongst all the stakeholders and our, of course, eminent panelists. The session will provide insights into emerging models of engagement, building world-class infrastructure, and nurturing partnerships to achieve higher productivity levels. I hope the participants in this digital conference will contribute actively in the deliberations and take back valuable points and insights. With further ado, may I now request Mr. Manish Sehgal, Managing Director, Alvarez & Marshall, to deliver his address on sustainable infrastructure, partnerships, and operating models. Over to you, Manish.
Thank you, Dhruv. Distinguished panel members, CII team, ladies and gentlemen. Always a pleasure to attend CII Institute of Logistics events, and compliments to CII for, and while we all have discussed logistics, warehousing, but my compliments to CII to think about sustainability as a new dimension, which I believe is not just important from the point of view of regulators and the conscience keepers, as I call them, but also increasingly for the developers, service providers, and customers, right? And while we have a great panel, with people who have had first-hand experience of seeing the evolution of this industry, I thought I would possibly use my session or my opening comments to possibly also put some questions back that as a community of stakeholders that are actually somewhere involved in seeing the evolution of warehousing industry need to also think very seriously about, right? Now, everyone is excited about the fact that warehousing is this next big opportunity, maybe 800 million square feet of demand, today possibly going to 1 billion square feet. Dhruv alluded to the fact that there is a lot of patient capital that actually is also available, I would say, in the wings to support the development of that billion square feet, right? You take the grade A, B cut, maybe like a 30% of that, right? Where a lot of focus has gone over the last few years. I would say more than 5 to 8 years. However, I mean, for me, the bigger concern is really what happens to the remaining 70%, right? Because these are not sort of services businesses. There's hard buildings out there, right? There is infrastructure out there. Somebody's actually set up that 2,000 square feet go down, maybe a legacy developer or a small asset owner. Somewhere when we look at the evolution of this industry, and like what we've seen in some of the other sub-segments within logistics as well. We saw some of that in transportation, right? The marginal players actually can create a very significant, opportunity and also a challenge, right, for the evolution of this industry. We all have seen how, let's say, some of the modern warehouses, right, where possibly we're talking about box sizes, scalable to 1 million square feet single location, are being constructed in India, right? And everyone is kind of, looking at the specs of those warehouses that are comparable to possibly what you will see anywhere else in the world, right? And good part is that we're all seeing it as we speak today. In fact, there are enough examples of really high spec boxes that are being developed, and also there's enough demand for that. However, what we also have to keep in mind is that there is this unutilized, and increasingly this capacity will become more and more unutilized, right, over a period of time, which is your grade B minus, B subprime as I call them, C, and downwards. Now, therefore, what we need to think about is as follows, right? Like what we've seen in the case of and again, whether we see it from the point of view of economic sustainability of this industry, or whether we look at it from the point of view of sustainability or work practices, or even we see from the point of view of the kind of inefficiencies some of these smaller warehouses have, somewhere it will become a responsibility of the industry, and that to the organized industry, to somewhere carry them along, right? And we saw in the case of transportation where some aggregation models came in. People actually talked about creating some level of platform for small marginal operators to also get showcased, or at least where their capacity was made available to customers. We saw it in the case of hotels, right? Hospitality industry, where a lot of marginal guest houses actually got rolled up into what I would call as a branded platform, right? And I won't really talk much about the issues that came with it, but I would say that somewhere when we also think about economic sustainability and efficiency of processes, somewhere the responsibility would actually also lie on the organized market, and especially that 30% of capacity that possibly is creating a product and exposing customers to the possibilities of this world-class product in this market. That's one. Second, see, very interestingly, I call them obviously the conscience keepers, right? I mean, I was reading a study that was done by a World Greenhouse Council. Now, they actually in America had done this study which showed that, and quite often we think that pollution or so-called the environmental issues are caused by transportation, right? Their study revealed that actually the biggest source of environmental I would say pollution was actually buildings, right? Followed by industries, followed by transportation. In fact, transportation was third in that list, right? And buildings, again, you have to sort of think about it as a whole. I mean, all sets of buildings. But again, when we think about what that thought tells us is that to a great extent the supply chains, the only fixed part of that supply chain actually is a warehouse, right? The moment you fix the location of a warehouse, your entire movement of vehicles, people gets decided by that. So warehouse, actually, that building actually has a very important role in making supply chain sustainable. So for instance, I mean, if you really look at, if you get the location of that warehouse wrong, for instance, right? I'm not saying people will, I mean, suppose that location is such that it actually significantly increases the transportation from that warehouse to end customers, or movement from suppliers to that warehouse. Actually, you are not just causing inefficiency from a cost perspective, but imagine the kind of inefficiency you're causing from sustainability perspective, because you've actually started creating a ripple effect because of that, right? And we are seeing that there is an increasing focus on I actually had this opportunity to look at how some of these global developers take decisions about the specs or the design of a warehouse. even while deciding the location, sustainability was a factor to them. In fact, they considered all these factors that, look, what would be the lead kilometer that trucks have to do, including, how much travel people will need to do, which actually leads to let's say, pollution or emissions. And then comes the 4-box, right? Basically inside the 4-box and outside the 4-box, as we talk about. Now, again, while we have seen very clearly, some of the newer buildings which are coming nowadays, which are LEED certified, somewhere I think this trade-off between cost and what is hygiene, right? By hygiene, I mean things like in one of very recent cases, we were trying to sort of do away with the conventional source of energy for lighting or let's say air circulation in a large warehouse using solar panels, right? Now, I must say that, look, fancy as it may sound, right, and you can actually in many of these locations prove that you can largely do away with your grid connected power source. Sometimes the costing, when you put that whole thing together, you realize that it actually becomes purely from the point of view of how you will cost it out, and therefore look at the margins that you would make, sometimes can get a little difficult, and especially if there is a local developer who's trying to sort of think about what would be the cost of setting up this box, right? And suddenly putting that entire model with let's say solar lighting and solar air circulation makes it maybe like 200 rupees higher, right? There's a bit of a challenge around it that the market is not today ready in certain parts to kind of absorb it. However, a very interesting angle there was that as you start thinking about keeping this product relevant to more and more customers, and a case in point here was maybe a facility that was being evaluated by one of the global e-commerce marketplaces, right? In fact, for them, this was actually a hygiene requirement. They in fact wanted, things like to what extent your energy sourcing is through solar, or what kind of a roofing material you've used, what kind of insulation you've used, so that there are better, you actually are able to sort of keep the box cool, right? And therefore reduce the requirement of any other air circulation, or for that matter, how you use daylighting versus, natural daylighting versus actually using any other form of lighting. I mean, it's interesting that people actually have started, I'm sure, Anshuman, Dhruv will share their own experiences. I've seen there are customers who are becoming increasingly conscious, and they actually have some of these points in their checklist now, and possibly willing to pay that 2 rupees extra or 3 rupees extra if they find a box that actually meets some of these requirements, right? And therefore, the last point I wanted to make was that as we think about developing, right, and again, my view is that this is, India would need about 1 billion square feet in the next 4 to 5 years, right? Maybe 200 billion more. I don't think it's humanly possible, right, for us to create that, in the manner, let's say, both resources, by that I mean capital, and also availability of land, the whole machinery and actually executing. It is not possible for us to build it like that. We have to actually work with small time developers, right? We'll have to work with marginal developers and operators, and therefore, one point that I want to sort of drive home here, and happy to sort of get views from the panel also, is how do we carry them along in this journey towards building that 150, 200 million square feet more in this country, right, over a period of time, in a manner that is economically sustainable and also environmentally sustainable. Second, as we are building more warehouses, as we are building more boxes, so far, the phenomenon has been restricted to maybe handful of cities, right? I think we will also start going down. So the standards which are actually being followed globally, and we've seen examples, how do we sort of think about making it a hygiene, which means that we actually, if let's say there is a basic sustainable spec of a box, right, which actually makes it a sustainable box, right? I mean, as we would call it, frankly, it comes at a certain cost, right? And therefore, educate, graduate the market to believing that that is really the new hygiene, that is really the new normal now. And therefore, it would also require a concerted effort by customers, developers, 3PLs, to make this a new norm, right? Like the way we saw it in e-commerce, how certain new normals were created when it came to just servicing that industry was concerned. And third, I think there is also a role to be played by technology providers, right? How do they sort of help this Indian warehousing community with automation solutions, with, let's say, natural, renewable-based energy solutions, and make them, scalable while addressing the cost structures that work in India. And I keep coming across these young startups, right? So there's a young startup that came across that has actually created a very interesting automation solution at sort of quote unquote Indian, I would say a frugal mindset, and therefore the cost structure of that automation was possibly lower than what you would otherwise do if you were to import this entire automation solution from America or Germany, right? And maybe do we need to support that community of entrepreneurs who are actually looking to build the sustainable technology solutions for warehouses as well. With that, maybe I'll take a pause and Dhruv, I don't know if I addressed some relevant comments, but I thought maybe this could be an interesting 3 or 4 angles for us as a panel to debate and discuss further. Thank you.
No, I think Manish, thank you so much. I think I think you've pointed out on areas which are extremely relevant, and I think if we are to achieve that target, I think and I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of altering operating models. And I think on that piece, when we look at some of the marginal players and making sure that they are included, and I know, for example, Dr. Ahirwar and the special secretary, they've just come up with norms and standards as obviously as a benchmark. But I think it's extremely important also to try and see, and maybe just add one point to yours, is probably the role the government needs to play to make sure that sustainability of warehouses is also supported, right? With making sure renewable grids are added to a cluster or a warehousing cluster. We need to think of last mile connectivity, because very often we may do math in India, in terms of just cross flight or road distances, but the quality of roads for last mile sometimes can be a major challenge. So I think, it's very interesting points. I think maybe we can, add some of these and then wait for Dr. Ahirwar to give us maybe a government flavor in terms of what's the support both on a state, local, and then central level that, various warehousing companies need to have. And just adding on a flavor of what you said. But no, I think it's a phenomenal start. Thank you so much, Manish. I think, after that, I think very insightful, submission and comments and thought-provoking session from Manish. I'd like to request Mr. Anshuman Singh, Chairman and Managing Director of Stellar Value Chain Solutions, to deliver the special address, please.
Thank you, Dhruv, Dr. Ahirwar, Manish, Dr. Bhanu, Mahi, and all respected gentlemen on the panel. Good morning to you all. Thank you for having me here. I think I seem to be a permanent fixture. I did try to tell Bhanu that it's been too many years now on building warehousing competitiveness, but she insists. So here I am. My personal experience has been that worldwide and even in India, warehousing as a sector, warehousing as an infrastructure, warehousing in terms of competitiveness has always been driven by a single factor, and that is consumption across the world. In India too, warehousing evolved largely because of consumption. In the early 2000s, mid 2000s, and the late 2000s, and I happened to be there in the same sector, and I did take the opportunity and did whatever I could do best then in the last company that I had co-founded. Into that time, the warehousing competitiveness and the growth was driven by retail, brick and mortar retail. 14 onwards, in the last 7-8 years, it has been driven by e-tail. So earlier it was retail, now it is e-tail. But finally, it's all consumption. And consumption is here to stay. Consumption is here to grow. And a combination of e-tail and retail is what will continue to drive warehousing. That being so, the providers to e-tail and retail, that is the manufacturers, the brands, the products, those companies, which in our company in Stella, we classify two different sectors. One is consumption, that is retail and e-tail, and one is the omni-channel, that is all the manufacturers and the brands, the FMCGs, the consumer durables, the furniture, the home, the pharma, the fashion, the lifestyle. Now, all these providers to the consumption, the products of consumption, those companies haven't yet transformed or yet caught on to the bandwagon of modern competitive warehousing. They still are somewhere in between. Even if you today talk to a lot of senior people in those sectors and industries in FMCG, if very, very senior people, you'll still hear the term go down or depot coming out of their mouths. They still call it go down. They still call it depots. Every single FMCG leader, even the supply chain heads or even the directors, still call it depots. It's time, it's over the 30, 40 years, that's still a depot in their mind. It's still a go down in their mind. It still hasn't become warehousing. It still hasn't become a core differentiator of their supply chain. And that's for the retail and the e-commerce side, it has completely transformed. And I was very lucky to be a key member of that evolution phase in the 2006, 2007. In fact, 2007, when I built the first 5 lakh square feet warehousing in India, and I built it in 8 cities. The first one was in Hasangarh, which was a pure jungle at that point of time. Today, it's a big warehousing hub, Hasangarh near Delhi. Everybody said that you have gone crazy. 5 lakh square feet warehouses, you must be nuts. Today, that has started becoming the norm. In 2008, when I built the first 12-meter building, they said, you are again nuts. 6 meters, 8 meters was okay. 12 meters doesn't work. Today, 12 meter has become the norm. However, it's still very, very heavily dependent on consumption, that is e-tail and retail. And there are a lot of constraints which have not yet made warehousing as competitive as it can be. One of the reasons I named my company Stellar, 15 years ago, when there was not enough resources, when there were not enough technology, there was not enough good quality buildings, there was not enough knowledge. And I was heading a company which served the largest retailer in the country at that point of time. My biggest job was to put millions of SKUs into thousands of stores across the country as a co-founder of the logistics company that I was running. The biggest challenge was how to do that without all this. But I used to do it somehow with my team. And as a result, I got the nickname, the Jugaad King. That was 15 years ago. When I founded Stellar, my biggest aim in life was to remove that tag and be called the enemy of Jugaad. Because today we don't have constraints of resources, money, capital, knowledge, talent, or infrastructure. There's no constraint. Jugaad is Indian-based innovation in a constraint-based environment. Jugaad is nothing but constraint-based innovation. Today, there are no constraints in India. Capital is available in plenty. You can see the IPOs that are happening right now and the kind of billions of dollars that are coming in. Capital is available for plenty. Talent is available from across the world. And infrastructure is available for the taking. So there's no constraint. So why Jugaad? Unfortunately, there are still traces of Jugaad in our warehousing infrastructure, even in the new age. While we were talking about a lot of now companies jumping onto this, a global company jumping into a lot of global American dollars or global dollars coming into this play and building the state of the art, what they call grade A warehouses, it still has certain traces of Jugaad. Now, those traces of Jugaad are still based on, are largely driven by the fact that people other than e-tail and retail, e-commerce and retail, are still not willing to pay the prices for modern premium buildings, which would give the suitable yields to the people who are investing in the infrastructure. And why is that so? Now, that is because of a lot of constraints, either because of governmental laws, FSI regulations. Bhiwandi, which is the largest warehousing hub in the country, still officially only has a 0.1 FSI allowed. Nobody builds less than 0.6 or 0.7. But officially, legally, if you have to literally look at it, it's 0.1 or 0.2 by the Gram Panchayats. And everybody builds 0.6 or 0.7. If you actually study the best warehouse in the world, you can't exceed 0.45 if you have to build a world-class quality building. 0.45 is the maximum FSI that you can utilize. Land being so expensive in this country, because this is a country which has smaller land mass and still has 130 crore people, so land is not available in plenty. Land being as expensive as it is, there are traces of jugaad even from the best warehousing infrastructure builders from the world. They still try to cross 0.5, they still try to cross 0.55 and wherever possible 0.6 to try and optimize on the land utilization. And as a result, we are still seeing a lot of jugaad. I'll just give you a simple example. And it is as basic as it gets, but it escapes even the best of people. All import containers or all large containers are 40 feet. And they come on a trailer. And then there is a horse in front of the trailer, which is around 10 feet. The total length of the trailer and the truck is 50 feet. There's talk of even extending the length of the container further. So 52, 53 feet is the length of the container, the horse and the trailer. In a warehouse which has hundreds of docks, or maybe 50 docks, one after the other. If on a dock number 5 and a dock number 7, there are these two trailers being parked for the loading, you have to put the third trailer at dock number 6. Common sense will tell you that the trailer will have to go right in front of the other two containers and then back up and come back. So what is the minimum length or distance in front of the dock that will be required for this trailer to back up? It will be 105 feet, a minimum. If we build in driver efficiency, it will be 110 feet. That becomes 35 meters, 30 to 33 meters. The best of warehousing infrastructure builders, even the global ones in India, are leaving a space of only 16 feet in front of the dock instead of 30 to 33 feet. That's the kind of jugaad which is creeping into even the most modern grade A buildings. So grade A buildings are literally not truly grade A buildings as per world standards. They are grade A buildings with some jugaad standards. Now, are those people at fault? No, because if they leave 30 meters in front and then a 10-meter road, 40 meters gone, the FSI utilization will be 0.5 instead of 0.5, 0.55, and the customers are not willing to pay the cost that is required. So I suppose another 5 years with e-commerce companies increasing the rentals for these buildings, with new age companies understanding these the nuances, because this is a small nuance, but this hits productivity big time. It is not actually a small nuance. If your trucks cannot be parked, I mean, still even today, the biggest shame is that you have grade A 12-meter buildings with angular docks. The whole purpose of building a modern building gets killed if you have angular docks where there is a jugaad unloading. You bring it on an angular dock and somehow or the other take the goods inside. You go to Bhiwandi, even 12-meter buildings, modern buildings have now got angular docks with only 10, 12 meters space in front instead of 32 meters. So this jugaad element has to go away. And for the jugaad element to go away, a lot of answers collaboratively along with the government and the industry and the customer and the warehousing 3PL players and the infrastructure players jointly will have to be taken. And that's why I'm bringing this up at a topic at the CIA conference, because the government will have to look at things, state governments as well as the central government will have to look at this FSI regulation. It will have to be standardized. They will have to understand that 0.5 will have to be allowed. They will also have to reduce fees on conversions, on CLU conversions. If warehousing and infrastructure, if it is necessary for the growth of the country, then you can't have prohibitive CLU charges. You can't have prohibitive ILP charges. I mean, in Bhiwandi, they've allowed ILP, but how many people have taken the ILP license? It's a tedious, lengthy, time-taking, and an expensive process. As a result, even after the ILP laws are coming in 3 or 4 years ago, not many ILP parks have started coming in. Third is that omni-channel companies will also have to start, because they are the final product suppliers to the retailers and the e-commerce players. They will also have to start getting into a mindset that warehousing competitiveness, modern buildings will finally not increase their cost. A per square feet rental might increase, but the total cost of supply chain is only going to reduce because of the higher productivity that you're going to get, the higher economies of scale that you're going to get out of modern buildings. A lot of companies have evolved. A lot of traditional companies are still evolving. India is a country where everything happens, but happens over a period of time. This is a slow and steady country. Nothing happens in a hurry, and nothing never misses out. So everything happens, but in due course and time. So it will happen, and we look forward to the day that when we start building modern warehouses with super high productivity, with a 35-meter apron in front of the docks, where the customers are willing to pay the higher rentals for that modern building and yet take advantage in terms of cost through the higher output. In terms of automation inside the warehouses, still some way to go. Some automation has started happening. The kind of automation I put in 2009-10 was only for one retail chain. Even that kind of an automation has not yet been replicated in 2021. So still long way to go. E-commerce companies are now driving the change, but companies in each sector will have to start driving, either allow the 3PL players to invest, or they invest themselves or jointly invest, and work on total cost of supply chain as a percentage of sales or as a percentage of revenue or as a per unit cost, rather than how many rupees per square feet, what is the total rental. That is a methodology which will have to go away. Now a total cost of supply chain, total cost of operating the business will have to become more relevant than looking at per square feet cost, because per square feet costs are irrelevant. With 12-meter modern state-of-the-art buildings with a lot of changes in the building, which bring in a lot of sustainability. And Manish was talking about sustainability. That is another important factor. Most of the companies across the world are committed to 50% by 2030 and net zero by 2050. And we are working with a lot of such companies. They are enforcing us to follow sustainability standards. So that also will start becoming a norm. And these buildings are made for 30, 40, 50 years. They better take into consideration today what is required in 2030 and 2050, because all the buildings built now, 2020, will last up to 2050. If they are not capable of handling the sustainability requirements, which are now mandated globally, those buildings will have to be demolished and actually rebuilt. That will be a more expensive affair. So it will be better that all the warehousing players, local, domestic, global, small players, large developers, all put together, start following sustainability norms, which will last them in the long run, last the building for 50 years rather than 10 or 20 years. So a lot of factors. So although I've been speaking at this building warehousing competitiveness at 10, 15 years, I think the changes are still slow. This is a slow and steady country. Der hai, durust hai, hoga sab. So with this, I would want to stop here and let the other panelists take over.
Thank you, Mr. Anshuman Singh. I think that was very practical and I think very insightful in terms of what's happening. I completely agree with, I think the one point that you made towards the end in terms of, I think a change in terms of how we look at the operating model. Vis-a-vis, just being a rental space versus total logistics costs. I think the model, and that's a mindset shift, which I think will be very critical. And again, I think very insightful, very practical. I think, thank you so much. I think just on that note, after taking the address, special address from Mr. Anshuman Singh, I think it's an apt time to now turn to Dr. Surendra Ahirwar, Joint Secretary, Logistics, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, to now deliver the inaugural address after hearing from our previous two panelists. So, Doctor, over to you.
Thank you, Dhruv, and good morning to the distinguished panelists. It's really a pleasure to be here with you, and thanks CII for having me here to address the fraternity of logistics sector. I would have gone through a kind of a pre-decided text read out based inaugural informal address, but then after listening to the distinguished panelists, I'm really provoked mentally, and I therefore set aside my written down text which was to be delivered here as an address. So thank you very much once again to the CII Institute of Logistics and for having me here, and I definitely appreciate and congratulate the forum to organize this brainstorming session on a very, very relevant subject. that is building warehousing. Competitiveness is in 2021. Or this is a 2021 version of this. I think this is a continuous affair, I guess. You have it on a regularity. So maybe, so this is version 2021, or maybe for the period henceforth. So we understand, you have indicated a couple of points, Mr. Manish and Mr. Anshuman, and I guess Mr. Vishwanathan will also have a couple of points which we have had, discussed also in our previous meetings on the subject, and we have been working together as well. But before going further, I just want to, thank God that we are alive, and then we are talking about all these things, talking about life and taking it further on, right? We also should remember the supreme sacrifice which our brethren have made. I mean, who have been at the front line and have shielded us, from the fury of this pandemic. Going further from there, and we also should not forget to, forget that the enemy is still not defeated or decimated. So we should not put our guards down and keep ourselves masked up, keep ourselves vaccinated, protected, and following all the protocols for COVID. Now, dear friends, I maybe sound a little over optimistic, but my optimism is not unfounded when I look back in retrospect and maybe look at the historical trends. I see this economy is actually growing, and the society is getting only prosperous. It has not gone down. It has not. The graph has not been going down, as Mr. Anshuman has also said. यहाँ सब कुछ होता है, मगर अपने समय से होता है. So maybe the pace might have not been that great, but yes, we have moved, and especially post 1991, we have really moved in terms of GDP, in terms of growth, in terms of per capita. So we are definitely growing, and when the economy grows and the society gets prosperous, the greatest pressure is on the logistics sector, which is, I can say, the circulatory system of the economy and the society, a living society, right? So we are definitely growing. Our economy is growing, our prosperity is growing, so the purchasing power of the customer is also growing. So we may be only optimistic about the purchasing power of a consumer. We should not be deterred by the perception, or maybe to an extent, it may be a reality as well, that the customer is not ready to buy relatively more expensive services. I think the customer, we all are customer of some service provider or some goods seller. So are we not ready to buy the better things at a reasonable price? I think we all would say, yes, we are ready. Therefore, we should also extrapolate the same spirit into the sector also when we are selling ourselves some service or creating some infrastructure for creating some service. So there will be customers, there are customers, and there would be buyers of your services. So don't be hesitant in taking that risk. Many factors have been affecting our lives and this particular sector. And of late, the COVID-19 pandemic has affected us many ways. And I will only talk about the positive ways. As I have already said, I'm an optimist. So I'll be talking the positive aspect of the impact of this COVID, especially on this sector. And I say it has been a kind of a lesson which it has given, that we should transform ourselves and transform rapidly. I mean, we cannot be just growing at the rate we have been growing in the past. We'll have to definitely accelerate the pace of the growth. And this is the biggest lesson from us: transform in every way, whether it's horizontal expansion, vertical expansion, diversification, or changing our practices, standards, and the level of the service quality. So that's what I feel we should be going ahead with the spirit. And we know the warehousing the warehousing infrastructure and the warehousing as a service in India, has been traditionally government dominant, food sector dominant, go downish dominant, right? Confined to certain cities and only serving to limited clients. Definitely not much to a much extent to FMGC or the so-called the e-tailers, right? It has been more of a retailer, of course, oriented, and of course serving the agri sector or the food sector per se. And there has been also, in terms of the investment as well, there's been a huge dominance of the state. So policy level intervention, which is definitely of the government. The role in investment was largely of the government, and the commodities or the items which have been handled or warehoused, they have also been the ones which have been handled by the government and are in the government sector, mainly the food sector. So now the things have definitely changed. The context has undergone a drastic change. And thanks to, again, pandemic for this, the e-tail has come into being in a big way. And the consumerism, of course, has been ever increasing, which has led to greater movement in the FMGC sector, and which has further made us to realize that there is a need of upgrading infrastructure, expanding infrastructure. Think more about development, think more about investment in this sector. Right, we see that majority of the infrastructure which has grown is in and around the cities, and as a result, there has been a kind of a relative surplus, or I say apoplexy, at the the city urban areas, and also anemia in the periphery. Now, this concept probably, or this setup, or this situation of the infrastructural distribution was probably favorable for the conventional market situation, right? Or which we have been traditionally having. But now, having seen the transformation, experience this transformation in the market context, I think there is a need for thinking about having complementary infrastructure in the areas, in the geographies beyond the cities, maybe the semi-urban areas or the rural areas, where the consumers are largely settled. We instead of just looking at the concentrated consumers in the cities alone. So we need to have this infrastructure, the modern infrastructure, or the so-called the grade A warehousing, just not confined to the cities, but it has to be going beyond that. Now, of course, for this, we need just not the expansion of the traditional infrastructure, but largely, upgraded infrastructure with the greater adoption of the technology, better technology, better standards, international standards, because we cannot escape integration with the global economy, and we are already largely integrated, and therefore we should be responding to that call as well. Now, as far as the competitiveness is concerned in this sector, we understand that building efficient and lean processes are an environment of continuous improvement, as well as the adaptation and adoption of the better practices, global and domestic best practices, is what is the what can we call as a competitiveness in the sector. And logistics sector and the warehousing sector cannot be an exception to that. And we are definitely tending to adapt to the newer situation, but it is required to be fast-paced, and it also requires a bold decision making regarding investment, or regarding expansion beyond the traditional boundaries. So this, I think this platform, which intends to discuss various aspects of the warehousing and this industry in subsequent sessions also, I think would be a good effort to come out with some solutions to the problems which are generally identified. But I just wanted to highlight on a couple of initiatives and the policy initiatives per se, and generally they are concerning the standards, which industry has been feeling that there are some gaps in the standards. The organizations engaged in devising standards in India, like BIS or the Building Code or the WDRA, they are generally oriented towards the food sector and the traditional go-down warehousing concept. Now, we have tried to bring out some standards, of course, based on the feedback from the industry, and they're all your ideas, and we have consolidated them, and yesterday only we have kind of published it for further responses from all of you. And I feel while the primary responsibility for devising and notifying standards remains with the government, but what government does is adopt the industry standards. Now, if there can be a consensus within the industry, and maybe CII can take lead on that, maybe you can collaborate with other industry chambers and other platforms also. So there can be a consolidated approach, and you can have a industry standards which will not be denied by the government, right? And after all, no standards are so mandatory in nature that they're imposed on you. I mean, when you are developing a warehouse, you are deciding your own standards. Now, you look at the market when you decide on, like Mr. Anshuman was saying, about the length of the road in front of the dock, right, or alongside the dock. Now, these are the innovations which are permitted within the defined standards. Now, which we call as jugaad. Jugaad is not a bad word as such. There is a constrained situation, and we have to anyhow operate in that. Maybe constraint in terms of availability of land, as you rightly said, that there is a land acquisition is the biggest problem in India for business purposes, right? So there's since that's the biggest constraint, and we have to operate within that. So the defined standards does permit you the flexibility, but it also doesn't stop you from having other standards as well. I mean, based on the experience of Mr. Anshuman, as he has rightly indicated, I mean, there can be others also learning from it, and then can be adopting those standards to the extent possible. Maybe some people may further innovate on that and define new standards for, which may require even lesser land patch, right? There can be a vertical growth. There can be, if I take an example of railways, there was a big steel plant which was coming up in eastern part of the country, and they were having huge constraint of the land for unloading the wagons. So there is a full length rake length, one means about 700 meters length of the line, along which there is a tippler which is located. Now, that particular tippler needs to have 700 meters in front or before the tippler length, and equal length post tippler, right? Now, this guy was not having 1200 meters stretch, single stretch. What he did was he started using traverser, which reduced the requirement almost by half, right? So he just would unload a wagon and shift it laterally, sideways, right, and put it on another line which is parallel line before the tippler within that 700 meters. All right, so it's kind of taking a U-turn by shifting laterally. All right, so these are the innovations which you keep doing, and they are not guided by or restricted by standards which are already notified. So have your own standards. I mean, you're free to adopt national standard, global standard, or your own standards, innovative standards. So that's about standard. I think we should not be looking at, towards the government for publishing a standard. Until such thing is done, we shall not be doing a, kind of investment or taking an investment decision. So that's about standards. And regarding approval processes, I mean, this is absolutely a difficult area, and logistics division per se has been trying to do whatever it can, but since warehousing largely lies in the state domain, so we cannot be dictating so many things to them, but we can be only suggestive, and we are doing that role. And under this lead study, which we undertake on an annual basis, we are not only assessing the infrastructure requirement or the gaps in the states, we are also, kind of assessing the approval processes in various states. And after that completion of that exercise, we shall also be coming out with a standard single window process of approval, which may be digitized also subsequently. I mean, it will be left unto the states, while we would be giving a format to them, or a format for the digital solution, as well as for manual single window also can be possible, where they can just put together linked activities and make a single division or a department or an officer for that matter, or authority through which all these approvals can be sought. So this would accelerate the process, make things transparent, less difficult for you. And of course, there would be streamlining of processes which would be required. Some business process re-engineering would also be required. So we are doing all that, right? But till such time these things are coming out and these things percolate down up to the state level, I think you will have to keep innovating and finding out suitable solutions in the given situations, because we cannot just wait for these things to change, and our growth has to continue. Now, regarding this, further the monopoly, which I see, I mean, I consider as a monopoly of inadequacy, and there's hardly any scope for competition among in the sector, at least, right? And why I say so, because everybody is concentrating in the city areas when they are developing tending to develop the infrastructure, warehousing infrastructure. Probably there are only less number of people who are looking outward and beyond the city areas, or the so-called NCR, or the Mumbai region, or maybe Chennai, Calcutta regions. So if we have to be part of the growth and the dynamic growth which is taking place in the economy, especially post-pandemic, wherein the digitization has become more important, or e-tailing has become more conspicuous, I think we should be going for development of complementary infrastructure in a very centrifugal manner, right, into the rural and semi-urban geographies. So that's what I would like to suggest to you. And I'd also like to indicate there are huge opportunities which lie in these geographies. And what we talk about as a last mile connectivity actually becoming last 100 or few hundred miles. I mean, this last mile thing has to be brought back to the last mile only. Now, if my warehouse is located somewhere in Mumbai or Nagpur, or maybe Nasik, or maybe Gurgaon, and this warehouse is to serve large part of the north, large part of the west, or the south, or the east, that means beyond the fulfillment center, or the depot, or the warehouse, whatever you say, or distribution center hub, you have to have a long last miles stretch, maybe running into 200, 300, or 400 kilometers. which is not, which cannot be called as a last mile per se. Now, we have to set a limit for this last mile. What is that last mile? Where do we stop? So that definition of the last mile is what is required to be done. And for that, of course, we have to have a centrifugal distribution of the warehousing assets, as I've already said. So just to summarize this discussion, I would like to just give the 6 Ds in form of a prescription for the sector. And you can definitely take for granted our support required in that towards achieving those things. The first is definition of the sector, right? We are traditionally a go-downish warehouse, and we are gradually evolving from there. We have come to depots concept as well. We have past depots also. Depots, is a deposit or depository. I am just not considering warehouse as a depository. It has to, transform and change to transit warehousing, which will cater to, your clients, your customers in much more comprehensive manner. And we'll have to have, kind of integration of the so-called the last mile service, which may be rendered maybe through partnering with the transport companies or service providers for that matter, logistics service providers for that matter, if there can be a combination of that. So that has to be kind of, we'll have to think about defining the warehousing today. I mean, the modern definition of the warehousing. And accordingly, then we can, move forward and think about standards, think about the technology like that. The second D, I would say, is a development. Development, we understand that we are definitely in a state of inadequacy in terms of the infrastructure or the volume of infrastructure. That has to be enhanced. And for that, now the private sector has to realize that government has definitely decided to reduce its role as when it comes to infrastructure development, logistics infrastructure development in general, and warehousing in particular. So there has to be a greater private investment in this sector and greater development, and the development also has to take place in form of, I'll say, the third D, that is in a distributed manner. So distribution of infrastructure beyond the cities and into the geographies which are definitely deficient of this infrastructure. The fourth D I would say is about diversification. Diversification in every sense, the vertical, horizontal diversification in terms of just not storage service which you tend to give, but a transit storage service. Maybe you are diversifying in from just a cold storage. As a cold storage, I call it a absolutely static concept where cold itself is cold, and to this is added storage. So we should get rid of this cold storage concept and diversify into the temperature controlled kind of services, warehousing, which is more dynamic, and it's definitely a value addition to this infrastructure service. The fifth, I would say, is a digitization, which doesn't require much of the emphasis. We know is a need of the time, need of the hour. We need digitization of every process. I mean, we shouldn't be averse to adopting technologies like blockchain, which is very, very relevant, artificial intelligence, machine learning, or Internet of IoT, whatever. So we should be, proactively touching these technology and adopting these technologies. And the sixth one is the one, I'll say, de-risking the sector. We are, when we are taking, making an investment related decision, we are largely, guided by our perceptions, and the perception based on the historical trends and the developments. And we just do not invest beyond the known fields. I mean, even within India, I mean, most of the investors, most of the people who have the control on the capital or are blessed with the capital, they do not want to venture into the newer lands. Even within India, for them, they are the alien lands. So there has to be a de-risking in terms of the perceptional risk, right? There can be a very professional study or maybe a survey or a research which can be sponsored by CII, Institute of Logistics, to to map the potential of infrastructure development, which are the geographies which are not having this infrastructure or are highly deficient in the infrastructure. As a result, the logistics cost is increasing because you are having short arms and very long fingers, right? That kind of hub and spoke. So the fingers length has to be reduced, and for that there has to be a kind of a knowledge-based decision. And for that, I would request CII Institute of Logistics to undertake some professional study, sponsor some study, which can help the entire fraternity in taking a decision about investment. So de-risk the perceptional risk which is attached to this. And of course, there are real risks which are there. I mean, risk regarding non-availability of land, a risk regarding the government regulations, risk regarding the policies. Now, as I already said, I mean, to make yourself, kind of largely, insulated from the vagaries of the policies, right? You will have to kind of be innovative. I mean, nobody in the government, either in present or in future, would be able to assure you regarding the consistency, I mean, which again a relative concept and a very subjective concept, consistency in the policies. The policies are the dynamic phenomena, and it will keep changing. It will keep changing depending on the context, depending on the political hue, and so many other factors which determine the policy, right? So one has to be only innovative to endure these vagaries of the policy, and go ahead taking decisions, going for investment, and with a belief that it is a private sector which will drive growth, which will drive vibrance, which will drive the competition in this sector. And with this, I would like to pause here and wish all the best to the CII Logistics, Institute of Logistics, and CII in general, for a very, very real outcome from this virtual conference. Thank you very much.
Dr. Irvar, thank you so much for that fabulous insight. I think the 6 Ds, I think, gives a phenomenal framework for all of us to really think about how the space is evolving and moving. And as usual, and sir, you know this, I've said this to you before as well. So your optimism and your positivity is just infectious. So thank you so much, sir, for sharing those fabulous insights with us. Just moving on, we have a very special announcement. We have Armstrong. They're here to launch yet another innovative solution for your warehouse automation needs. So over to you, Mr. Ashwin Dravid, to tell us about the product, please.
Request you to unmute.
I'm so sorry. Thank you. So thank you very much, CII, for giving us an opportunity to present the new launch that we ought to do here. In fact, I thank dignitaries for giving us the opportunity. So today we are going to launch here a multi-shuttle, which is a cutting-edge technology that's helping people across globe in terms of speed to the market. It helps. It's an automatic storage and retrieval system that helps increase the speed to the market and reach your products faster to the customer very accurately. Often we have heard this name called micro fulfillment center, and we have discussed something about the pandemic that has brought changes into the ecosystem. We are looking at hyper-local delivery systems, and globally it has been seen that the micro fulfillment centers are getting predominantly popular. And as a part of that, we are launching here a multi-channel coupled with our association with global #1 company called Dematic. They're the #1 in warehouse and intralogistics across the globe, and Armstrong being pioneer in launching new products over the past 2 decades. It gives us immense pleasure to launch this here at this moment. Before we actually, I won't take much time, but I will launch into a video that gives you a glimpse of what this technology is about, the benefit that it delivers. And obviously that's just not enough. I mean, we have a booth here. Anybody wants to get more insights about this technology, we are more than happy to chime with them. Thank you so much. You can play the video. Thank you so much.
Well, that's very, very exciting. Thank you, Mr. Dravid. And I think this is definitely the way forward as far as the industry is concerned. So absolutely fantastic. I think just moving forward, I would now, like to request Mr. Mahida, Executive Director and Head of CI Institute of Logistics, to take up the MOU signing that we have planned today with academia.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning to all of you. Before going to that, let me take this opportunity to thank our Logistics Division, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, and all the industry players who are continuously supporting our initiatives of CA Institute of Logistics. And we are very glad that they recently announced one of the initiatives like MOVE, Membership for Value Engagement. The type of response we are getting is a testimony of industry support for our activities. The way you are guiding us and mentoring us is laudable, and we would like to continue to have your support. As you mentioned in the initial remarks, education is one of our key activities from the Institute, and we are continuously doing this activity in terms of driving the capacity building activities, both for industry as well as academia. One of the initiatives or the MOU signing, what you mentioned, we are going to partner with International Institute for Management and Technical Studies based out of Gujarat. In fact, they have global presence. I understand more than 14,000 students are taking these education courses in their institutes across the world. And we are very happy to associate with them. One of the main purpose, and we see the objective here is, whichever be the stream a student is going through, whether it's a commerce or engineering or any other stream, they have to have logistics literacy when they go out of their studies. So that's why CA Institute of Logistics would like to partner with them to do the short-term courses, advanced certificate courses, as they parallelly pursue their regular studies. So this gives an opportunity for those students to learn both regular discipline as well as additional logistics and supply side subject. This association will not limit only with academic students here. We also would like to come out with specific certificate programs and short-term programs for industry professionals also to take this opportunity. And we thought this is an opportunity for us to make announcement in this forum. And now I would request Mr. Manoj Thakkar to say a few words about this association going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mahendra. I hope I'm audible now. I had some technical issues, so thank you very much for this opportunity. Greetings from IIMT Studies. Would take this opportunity to speak further. First, thank you so much for this great insight in this forum, specifically by Ahir Sahab. He spoke really fantastic about new inventions and the government support to the industry. At the outset, let me express my sincere gratitude to CII Chennai for this opportunity. IIMT Studies is a global brand in online distance and blended learning, with its students spread across 45 nations. IIMT Studies is an MNC registered in India and in England, and is internationally accredited. Over the last 12 years, we have been have the competence to design, develop, and deliver industry-oriented courses accepted by all major corporations in India and overseas. So far, IIMT Studies has been adding value to the career progression of above 16,000 professionals. We equally feel pleased to share with you all that we have been rewarded with 10 national and international awards for its contribution enabling growth through industry-oriented programs. It's been a while. We've been working with CII Institute of Logistics and have joined hands a couple of years ago and have been thinking as to how we together can add value to the productivity and growth of this sector. This industry has been growing exponentially year by year. However, one of the major concerns remains is the shortage of skilled talent in the industry. Hence, we have decided to launch the course to build skill inventory in this industry, as this sector plays a very vital role in the economic growth of the country. Both the partners of this initiative are of the opinion that the course launched today would be beneficial to enhance knowledge and skills of the professionals of the sector. Hence, we suggest every professional should be encouraged to pursue these courses. Today, I take the opportunity to thank you all for continuous support to academia by offering opportunities of internships and career progression to many students and learners, and we are sure you would continue the same support to this program jointly developed and awarded by CII and IIMT Studies. Thank you all. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you, Mr. Thakkar, and congratulations to both CIL and academia for this wonderful initiative. Now, I'd like to request Mr. A.M. Vishwanathan, Executive VP Special Projects, Godrej Storage Solutions, to please deliver the closing remarks.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for a fantastic start to this conference. You really set the ball rolling, and we hope to keep it at this level. Special thanks to Dr. Rahirwar. Thank you, sir. Always your passion and drive, like Chairman said, keeps us going, as you know, on many fronts. Great of you to actually give up on the written speech and really speak your mind. That is great. Calling our logistics activity as a circulatory system, I think has given us a byword that we will use very effectively going forward in all our things. But thank you so much. We take the point about developing infrastructure in the rural areas. It's been a point of discussion amongst many forums, and we will certainly take it up along with the 6 Ds, like Chairman said, which really defines maybe the direction for us going forward. I'm sure we'll take this up at CII forums. Thank you, Dr. Rahirwar. Thank you so much. Anshuman, self-styled Jugaad King, as he calls himself. I think Dr. Rahirwar added a lot of credibility to the title today. So you can now make it your official title, since Dr. Rahirwar has actually, endorsed it. But on a serious note, Anshuman has seen the growth of this industry, has lived through the growth of this industry, and his insights in any conversation are always illuminating. Thank you, Anshuman. Thank you for taking time and being with us. And the concept of how consumption drives everything in our industry and how it will continue to do so brings us back to the basics and brings us back to track. Also, the fact that, yes, while we might have been a Jugaad industry and we continue to be, how we need standards and processes, improvements going forward. Thank you so much, Anshuman. Thank you for sharing your views. Manish, you kicked it off very well. Thank you so much, raising those very pertinent questions to us. You actually got Dr. Rahirwar responding to one or two, so I think this will set the tone for the whole day. Thank you so much. Thank you for thought-provoking, raising the points. I would just like to add one more point. Dr. Rahirwar talked about standards. The CII Green Business Council is also doing a fair amount of work on trying to promote sustainability, launching green warehousing practices, looking at evaluation, endorsements of various kinds. But excellent. Thank you for that thing. We recognize the need that there will be another 200 million square feet or thereabouts to be put into place, and that the industry will have to take everybody along, like you said. Very pertinent directions, and thank you so much. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Kotak, for taking us through. Lovely session. Thank you, Maidar. Thank you, Banu. I think we'll now lead on to the main sessions of the day, the technical sessions of the day. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take your leave as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And to all the audience, please join for the next session as per the schedule of today. Thank you very much. And thank you to the dignitaries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.